I'm gonna close mine.
All right, here we go. Any questions before we jump right in?
Many, but go ahead.
So one of the things that you may want to think about is the relationship here between Joseph and the Egyptians as compared to the relationship between Jacob and Esau. That is, especially at the beginning when Esau comes in from the hunt and says, I'm going to die if I don't get food right now. His inability to see the bigger picture, to plan ahead, and Jacob's willingness to take advantage of that for his own either personal or sense of higher spiritual God relationship. Again, the motivations of Jacob are not given to us in that story. Here, the Egyptians rather, are going to come to Joseph with the same kind of statement. We have no food, we can't eat, we're going to die. And could they have planned ahead? Could they have stored up their excess rather than eating it all up? Spend it now versus save what you don't need kind of planning. And is Joseph, we don't get his motivation, is Joseph taking advantage of them for his own needs? Here, I mean, it does say that he's doing it for Pharaoh, so there's some higher else. But what is Joseph doing? Is he scheming? Is he planning? Is he, as he claims, only doing God's will and God's plan, as his brothers had done when he said to them, "Don't worry, it was God's plan for you to sell me into slavery and get me down here so that you could be saved." Is that Did Joseph know that all along? Does he see it in retrospect? Lots of other kinds of questions in addition to simply what is the text telling us?
Do you think the two stories are meant to be paralleled?
Well, I don't think there's certainly in midrashically, the rabbis, when they see parallel stories, use that for midrashic or sermonic purposes.
Yeah.
Is that something that they discover, they invent, or was inherent in the text that they brought out?
And the answer is obviously yes to all of them.
Yeah, exactly. We have no footnotes or uh, biblical compendiums or annotated Torah that can tell us what was the biblical author thinking when they created these texts. And of course, we also have the whole debate as to whether this was written in some earlier time or was this written in time retrojected back to an earlier time. So
Well,
is
let
this
alone having the newsreel of the events.
exactly the newspapers of the time?
I
But
want
could
newsreel, I want the motion.
but could you just look at it as, um, I mean, we've seen all these family stories with human foibles, human failings, jealousies, retribution, and why not just assume that in human history, people have taken advantage of each other, and
Yes,
this is one more human story that it repeats because people are always taking advantage of each other. Maybe one of the things that your religion wants to moderate, that your ethical standards want to moderate.
and that becomes the difference between Torah in one part aspect of Torah versus the surrounding mythologies was that Torah does in fact report our people had these human foibles. The other mythologies had everybody else had these human foibles, but our ancestors didn't. Our leaders were wonderful. Everybody else had these problems.
But
We say,
you can only say it was wonderful if those people who
If you
had this
won,
were communicating with God and knowing there was a higher purpose to this. But
well, no,
the
I mean
text doesn't
they
tell you
look
that.
back. yeah, our ancestors were always much nicer than everybody else's ancestors.
Well, true.
And
Because we
also,
won.
yes, but the gods of the surrounding cultures were capricious. And the Torah reports a God who has some ethical system or some orderness out of chaos.
But that doesn't help you with Esau and
Jacob.
Jacob.
And Jacob, yes. So I'm just saying that it would seem that the whoever's writing this stuff at whatever age for whatever audience would seem to be doing more than simply telling a story. And are they doing, is the more simply trying to guide us into a higher ethical God-related purpose? Is it trying to explain current events on the basis of past history, or all of the above? Exactly. In any case, the people have now spent all their money, their silver is gone, and they say, all we have left is our cattle. And that's verse 17. Vayaviu et miknehem el Yosef. Vayiten lahem Yosef lechem, basusim, uva mikneh hatzon, uva mikneh habakar, uva chamorim, vaynahalem, balechem bechol miknehem, bashana hahi. So vayaviu et miknehem. So they bring all of their animals, their livestock. Livestock is probably a good translation rather than cattle. So all of their beasts, all of their domesticated animals. El Yosef to Joseph. Vayiten lahem Yosef lechem. And then Joseph gave to them bread. So this is a barter exchange. And actually, even silver, any form of trading is actually barter. Whether you give a plastic card or paper money or actual goods. So they bartered away, they gave away all of their livestock, all of their animals. And now we're going to find out what their animals were. Basusim in their horses, uva mikneh hatzon, and in the livestock of the flocks, that is the sheep and goats, uva mikneh habakar, and the livestock of their cows, their cattle, their beef animals, uva chamorim, and even their asses, their donkeys.
Which is donkeys?
Chamor. Chamor is a ass or donkey. My cursor doesn't want to work, so. Vainahalem balechem, so they bartered for in the bread. This was the exchange system. Bechol miknehem, in all of their livestock. Bashana hahi, in that particular year. Shana hahi, that year. Or Bashana hazot would be this year. Shana hahi, that year. So this takes place in that year. What we're not given clarity about is which year is that year. Is it the first year of the famine? Is it the second year? Because in the first year they used their silver. Is it in the fourth year? Because remember, Joseph says to his brothers, come on down and live with us because the famine is already 2 years old and there's 5 more years. So are we now in the third and fourth year of the famine? We don't know what year. We only know that for a year's worth of bread, they traded away all of their livestock.
Not wise.
When they say bread, it was really like grain, wasn't it? Flour?
Well, it was food stuff.
Yeah.
The supermarket was open and they could browse the aisles to get whatever they wanted.
So in this case, lechem is a very general word for food.
In the same sense that when we say the motzi over lechem, we cover any food that we might eat.
Oh, I thought that includes anything made with sort of flour.
No, if you say hamotzi lechem min haaretz before a meal, you can eat fruits, vegetables, cookies, ice cream, meat, potatoes.
Hmm.
You name it, you get it. 18. Vatitom hashana hahi, vayaviu elav bashana hashenit, vayomru lo nichached me adani, ki im tam hakesef umikneha behema el adoni, lo nishar lifnei adoni, bilti im gviatenu va'admatenu. So they were long-winded. Vatitom. Now
Can you
this,
go more slowly, word for word?
yes. Vatitom. Now this is the tom is the ended, the finished. Nothing remains. They have finished it all. So vatitom hashana hahi. So that year now comes to an end. The year is done. Vayavohu elav, and they came to him. So this again is the Egyptians are coming to him. We don't know if this is the Egyptian leadership of the towns. All of the Egyptians massed in the courtyard of Joseph. The union leaders came. The farm aggregate leaders came. We don't know who's coming, but it's they. They always covers anybody in conspiracy theories as well. So this is they came to him, that is to Joseph, Bashana Hashenit, in the second year. Again, this is clearly the second year after the first year, but was the first year the third year, or even the fourth year? So somewhere in the middle of this, either at the beginning or the middle of this 7-year drought world, in the second year of that time, they come and they say, Vayomru, they say lo to him. So Vayomru lo. Vayomru lo, they say to him, lo, not. Lo nichached. We will not hide. Nichached, we will hide. Lo nichached, we will not hide. Me Adoni. And notice we're switching number in our pronominal suffixes.
I did notice.
They come and they say, Me Adoni, from my master. So it's they each, as in one voice, perhaps. And lo nichached is we will not hide. Me Adoni, from my master. So pronouns are a little bit fluid in biblical text.
What is the first lo?
Lo, the first lo is to him. Vayomru lo, they say to him.
Oh,
Lo nichached, we will not hide. And then me Adoni, from my master. As opposed to me Adonenu or something like that.
And why? Why do you think it goes from plural to singular?
Yes. Right, a midrash. They speak as one voice. Can you imagine all of the Israelites going to the Beit Knesset and all speaking as one voice?
no.
And the more hungry they
Americans
are,
rallying at the Capitol,
the more hungry they are, the more voices there'll be.
although apparently the more hungry they are, the more they are unified in their one voice. So Perhaps being told this Egyptian society is a little strange. We don't understand it.
Or they were really desperate.
Or they were so desperate, they said a spokesperson who says, we all, and then speaking personally, my master.
And the writer, the scribe or the writer of this could not have made a mistake.
Of course not. Or Adoni is a title. Yosef is called Adoni.
Oh, yeah. But
And we
wouldn't they
have,
call him, wouldn't they then call him Meha Adoni?
no, because the definite article is assumed when you have a pronominal suffix. When Abraham and Isaac are walking up the hill, and Isaac says Avi, he doesn't say Ha'avi. And we have that often, by the way, in the Torah when we talk about God in God's various appellations, God's various names. Uh, Sometimes we try to translate them, as in Adonai Tzvaot. And the prayer says Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, which means God's name is Adonai Tzvaot. But translators often try to translate it as Lord of Hosts or something like that. So perhaps Joseph's title is Adoni. In any case, they say to Joseph, we will not hide from Adoni, from my master, from you. Ki im tam hakesef. Ki im tam, literally, for if ended. Hakesef, the silver. Basically saying, we already are totally out of silver. There is not one ingot of silver left in all of our houses. And now, umikne habehema, and now the livestock of the domesticated animals. Behema is often translated as cow or cattle's also, but it indicates a domesticated animal as opposed to a chaya, which is a wild animal. So we're out of kasef, and all of the livestock, El Adoni, has been given to you as well. So you have all the kesef and you have all the livestock. Lo nishar lifnei Adoni. So therefore, lo nishar is not remaining. Nishar is remaining. Lo nishar, nothing remains. There is not a remainder. Lifnei Adoni, before you, before Adoni. Bilti, except for im geviatenu va'admatenu. The only thing we have left is our bodies and our land.
What is im? With?
Im if, literally if. But as in the ki im tam, it's sort of an indicator that we're really talking about the absolute. So all we have left is our bodies and our land. And again, those are in first person plural pronouns. Our bodies and our land, it's all that remains to us. Lo nishar, there is not remaining before you, except for bilti im, geviati bilti im would be translated into English as except for. Literally without if. but we read it as except for all that we have left is Geviatenu, our bodies, Admatenu, and our ground, our land, our farmable earth. 19. Lama namut le'enecha gam anachnu gam admatenu k'nei otanu ve'et admatenu balechem v'nihyeh anachnu v'admatenu avadim lefar'o v'ten zera v'nihyeh v'lo namut v'ha'adama lo tesham. Again, they have a lot to say. 19. Lama namut. Why will we die? Le'enecha, to your eyes, literally. So, why will you see us die? Would be an English translation. Gam anachnu, that is also us. V'gam admatenu, also our land. Our land will die. And the question is, why will the land die? The answer is going all the way back to the remembering what Genesis chapter 2, chaos was, land with no one to work it. The land becomes a drought dust bowl if there's no person to work it. So if we die, not only will we die, but also our land will die. It will revert to its wild, chaotic state.
Don't we assume that because there's a famine?
Well, there's a famine or drought, but theoretically, when the Nile Delta then floods again, it will wash new nutrients into the land, and the land will then be fertile again. But it will be fertile with wild rather than domesticated grasses and grains, which from the human standpoint is worthless, dead land. So we will die and our land will die. K'nei otanu ve'et admatenu. So buy, purchase, barter us, ve'et admatenu, and our land. So now we're bartering. We bartered our silver for bread. We bartered our livestock for bread or food. Now barter us and our land for food. K'nei otanu ve'et admatenu balechem, or balachem, the end of the phrase. So buy our land or exchange our land and ourselves for bread, for food. V'nihyeh anachnu, and we will be, we, v'admatenu, and our land, avadim lefar'o, workers, servants to Pharaoh, or slaves to Pharaoh. The Hebrew is all the same word. So they're selling themselves into perhaps indentured servitude. Exchange us and our land for bread, and us, we and our land will be now owned by Pharaoh. V'ten zera v'nihyeh, now, and give us seed, and we will live. So it's not give us bread, lechem, but give us seed.
Can you go back to Avdim?
Avadim is servants, slaves, workers. Lefar'o, to Pharaoh. So v'nihyeh avadim, and we will be workers, lefar'o, to Pharaoh. Not just we, but anachnu v'admatenu, we and our land. We and our land will be in the service of Pharaoh, and therefore any planting, growing, and harvesting that we do will belong to Pharaoh. V'nihyeh, and we will live, v'lo namut, and we will not die. Nichiyeh v'lo namut, and we will live and not we will die. V'ha'adamah lo tesham, and now the land will not become desolate. The land will not become unusable or irrelevant to human occupation.
Is that Tesham?
That's all that's in Tesham. The land will return to its original natural chaos.
You wouldn't say abandoned?
You could say abandoned, absolutely.
Or
But it's more than
useless?
just abandoned. It's what happens
Useless?
when the land is abandoned. When you abandon the land, the weeds take over.
Barren.
And 20. Vayiken Yosef et kol admat Mitzrayim lefaro, ki machru Mitzrayim ish sadehu, ki chazak alehem hara'av, vatihi haaretz lefaro. So Vayiken is the same word that we saw up above as Kene. Kene otanu, buy us, transact us. Vayiken Yosef, and Joseph therefore bought, accepted in barter, et kol admat Mitzrayim, all of the ground of Egypt, all of the land of Egypt. Lefaro, to Pharaoh. So Joseph bought it not for himself, but as the agent of Pharaoh. So now all of the land is owned by Pharaoh. And it says, Ki machru Mitzrayim, because they sold. So this is a voluntary transaction. He didn't take it, they sold it. And they sold it, so he bought it. They put their land up for auction, and the only bidder was Yosef. All of the land was foreclosed by Pharaoh's bank, and Pharaoh's bank ended up owning all the land. And who is the machru? Who are the sellers? Ish sadehu, a man, his field. Again, back to the singular, indicating that each person signed the contract. So this would be an indicator that it was totally each person chose to do it. And why did they do it? Ki chazak alehem hara'av, because strong on them was the famine or drought. Chazak is strong. So the famine is heavy. We've seen it before as kabed, heavy. Now it's chazak. This language, by the way, is going to parallel in the Exodus story what happens to Pharaoh's heart.
Pardon.
Yeah.
The later Pharaoh's heart, when we say hardens or stiffens, actually the words in Hebrew are chazak and kabed. Strong and honored, or heaviness. So the famine is very strong in the land on all of them, and they each, as I met to a man, ish sadehu, to a man they sold their field, or to a man they sold his field.
What did you get to Vathi?
Vatihi haaretz lefaro, and it was that the land to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh now owns all of the land, and now it's eretz, not adamah. Adamah is the farming ground, the fertile earth. Eretz is the entire land of Egypt now belongs to Pharaoh. Except next week.
But Vatihi, what is that?
Vatihi, and it was.
Ah,
Tihi, it will be, Vatihi, and it was. So it became, in an ongoing fashion, and it was imperfectly, ongoingness, Haaretz leFaro, Pharaoh owns it all. Pharaoh has all the eretz,
What
all the
was the
land.
hara of?
Hara'av, the famine, the drought.
Ah,
And 21, Ve'et ha'am ha'avir oto la'arim miksei gevul Mitzrayim va'ad katsehu. Ve'et ha'am, now the people, here as an object. So we have to find out what happened to the people. Ha'avir, and notice the root avar, the root ivri. The Ivrim are the ones who came from the other side, who crossed over. And avar is the word for past, as in not the present. So ha'avir, came to pass, or came to cross over, or came to relocate. So the am are oto, it, singular. So the people now are caused to change residence, to travel, to cross over, to be relocated. Le'arim, here is a city, le'arim, to the cities. So the people are relocated into the cities. Miksei gevul Mitzrayim va'ad katsehu. Gevul Mitzrayim is the boundary, the border, the Egyptian border, the edge of the land of Egypt. Gevul is the circumference, the surrounding edge. The people are now relocated from one end of Egypt to the other. Miksei katsei is the edge. From one edge of the boundary of Egypt, va'ad katsehu, to its edge. In a sense, then the English would say they are relocated to the cities at the very boundaries of Egypt from one end to the other. So the people are now taken out from the central Egypt, and they are sent out to populate the border towns.
so what is Va'ad?
Va'ad, up to, from one border all the way up to its corresponding border, or the opposite border.
Meets, so Mitra is, so there's the word edge 3 times?
Miksei and Katsehu.
But
To
what
the
about
cities of the to the cities of the
Mitzrayim?
edge of the boundary of
yeah.
Egypt and
Egypt.
up to its corresponding edge.
And what is Oto?
It,
It. So hard to learn those little words.
yes. Oto is the et ha'am ha'avir oto, and the people he caused to relocate it, or them, or the people. So we have two
From the
direct
center of
objects.
Egypt, from the center of Egypt to its cities, or from the outside to the cities?
No, they sent all of the Egyptians to populate the border towns.
But they had to take care of the land.
Yeah, but given that the Nile is in the middle, putting the people on the border would make them be the edge of the land that was fertile because it went to the Nile.
Right. So they're now not just relocated on the edge of the Nile, but they are farming all of the land of Egypt. So they're populating the towns from the Nile edge to the western edge of Egypt.
So theoretically, they've lost their own lands. They're just being
Right.
farmed out somewhere.
Not
They have, all
theoretically,
of
they
their
sold
land
it.
now belongs to Egypt, to the Pharaoh rather. So Pharaoh now decides who lives on what land.
So the eastern border of Egypt went to,
The Nile.
I'll be done at noon. Can you just
And
wait
the
a few?
east of the Nile was Goshen.
ah,
I would
what
have
was the western boundary then?
The western boundary would be the Sahara.
Ah,
thought that the Pharaoh already owned all the land and the people on it had the use of the land, just like England, right? England.
Well, they did at the time of the biblical author, who's now explaining how it was that they went from individual farms to nationalized farms. And if you want to take people out of the sense of their family, culture, national roots, you relocate them.
But the question is, what was the basis of the power of the Pharaoh before, when individuals own lands? How could he get taxes? What gave him his power?
Well, what we have a sense of in the biblical text, which doesn't delve into a great deal of Egyptology, is that the Pharaoh was a god on earth or a descendant of the gods. So the Pharaoh had divine power, and now the Pharaoh is gaining earthly power. So the biblical author is not going to delve into a full history of Egypt.
Yeah.
But they know that the Egypt that they know of is in this particular feudal system. And we're told in verse 21 what we already knew from our own history and other histories was if you want the Native American population not to identify with its historical roots and ancestors, you take them off their land and put them on other land. This is what Joseph did on behalf of the Pharaoh to the Egyptians. So it's an old story, oft repeated.
25.
Yes, next week we move on. And we are beginning with, and notice
Yes.
the whole Egyptian history vis-a-vis the Israelite history in Goshen in the E story is right here. Prior to the second half of verse 27, the last time we saw the E story was Joseph was relocating his father and his brothers in Goshen. The next thing we know is how it was for them in Goshen. The E story, northern and coastal people without direct border contact with Egypt probably had less awareness of the entire Egyptian situation and culture. They may have been trading north and east into the Fertile Crescent. The Y story, the red, who are the people on the boundary of Egypt, whose people are always going down to Egypt, would have been much more tied to the Egyptian history, culture, and awareness. So it's only in the Y story and the red story that we get this whole history of Egypt. The E story is going to be much more concerned with the history of the Israelites in Goshen. So we have to finish the Egypt story, and then we get a little taste of the E story before we will move on. So verse 22, Rak admat hakohanim lo kana ki chok lakohanim lakohayim. I think I may have, I'll have to go back and check. I think I have I wiped out a letter, the nun there. So that should be Kohanim. Probably getting rid of a trope. I got rid of an entire letter by accident. So ki chok la Kohanim me'et paro va'achlu et chukam asher natan lahem paro al kain lo machru et admatam. So now there's a clergy exemption from taxes. 23. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am hen kaniti etchem hayom ve'et admatchem lefaro he lachem zera uzratem et ha'adama. 24. V'haya bat vuot unatatem chamishit lefaro v'arba hayadot yihyeh lachem lezera hasadeh ula'och lechem v'la'asher b'vatechem v'le'echol letapchem. So 20% flat tax from then on after the in the new system. 25. Vayomru hayitanu nimsachen be'enei Adoni v'hayinu avadim lefaro. 26. Vayasem ota Yosef lechok ad hayom hazeh. Up until this day, which is always an indication in biblical criticism that this is being written much later. In a parenthetical note, even to our day. Al admat Mitzrayim lefaro, lachomesh rak admat hakohanim, levadam lo haita lefaro. Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen. The end of the story is, and meanwhile, back in Goshen, and then the editor redactor took that little aspect of the Goshenness of Israel, of the Joseph clan, and took that part of the story and stuck it on as a tagline to the red story. Vaye'achazu vayifru vayirbu ma'od. And that's our work for next week.
So can you